The rain was coming down hard that cold February evening when 10-year-old Marcus Thompson stood outside the glass doors of the most expensive grocery store on Madison Avenue. His worn-out sneakers had holes that let the freezing water soak through to his socks, making his toes go numb. But Marcus didn't care about the cold or the rain or the way rich people walking by looked at him with disgust. All he could think about was his baby sister Maya, just 8 months old, crying from hunger back in their tiny apartment in Harlem. Their mother had been in the hospital for 3 days now after collapsing at her third job. And Marcus had used the last of their food stamps yesterday. He clutched the 75 cents he had found by searching through couch cushions and under car seats at the laundromat. It wasn't much, but maybe, just maybe, someone would show him mercy today. Taking a deep breath that made his chest hurt. From the cold air, Marcus pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into the bright, warm store that smelled like fresh bread and expensive coffee. The moment Marcus walked in, every eye in the store turned to look at him. Water dripped from his torn jacket onto the spotless white marble floor, creating small puddles that reflected the fancy lights overhead. The store manager, a thin woman with blonde hair pulled back so tight it made her face look stretched immediately, rushed over with a look of pure disgust on her face. "Excuse me, young man, but this is a private establishment. We don't allow loitering or begging here. You need to leave immediately before I call the police." Her voice was sharp and loud, making sure everyone in the store could hear her authority. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't move. This was his last chance to get food for Maya. "Please, ma'am." His voice came out as barely a whisper, cracking from the tears he was trying so hard to hold back. "I'm not here to cause trouble, my baby. Sister needs formula. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning, and she won't stop crying. I have 75 cents. I know it's not enough for the fancy stuff you sell here, but maybe you have something, anything, that could help." The manager laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the store. 75 cents. Child, a single apple in this store costs more than that. This is Madison Avenue, not some corner bodega in the ghetto. Now get out before you ruin our floors any further. Just then, the automatic door slid open again, and in walked Harrison Sterling, one of the richest men in New York City. He owned half the buildings in Manhattan and had just come from a meeting where he'd made another $10 million in less than an hour. His suit cost more than most people made in a year, and his shoes were handmade in Italy. He barely noticed the commotion at first, too busy checking his phone to see how his stocks were doing. But then he heard the boy's voice, desperate and pleading, and something made him look up. Marcus turned to face the well-dressed man, and their eyes met. In that moment, Harrison saw something that annoyed him greatly: hope in the eyes of someone who clearly didn't belong in his world. Marcus took a step toward him, his wet shoes squeaking on the marble floor. "Sir, please. I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up. Every single penny, with interest. I swear on my father's grave. I just need enough for baby formula. My sister is only 8 months old, and she's all I have left in this world." Harrison Sterling had heard sob stories before. In his 52 years of being rich, he'd heard them all. People always wanted something from him, always had their hands out, always had some tale of woe designed to separate him from his money. He looked down at this dripping wet child with contempt. "Do you have any idea who I am, boy?" His voice was cold as ice. "I could buy this entire neighborhood with the money I make in a single day. And you think I care about your sister? Achoo. Think your promise means anything to me? What could you possibly offer me when you grow up? You'll probably end up just like your parents, poor, desperate, and looking for handouts." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each one making him flinch. But instead of running away or crying like Harrison expected, the boy straightened his shoulders and looked him dead in the eye. "My father died protecting people like you," Marcus said, his voice suddenly steady and strong. "He was a firefighter who ran into the North Tower on September 11th and never came out. My mother worked herself literally to death trying to keep us fed. And you stand there in your expensive suit and tell me I'm worthless. You might have all the money in the world, Mr. Sterling, but you're the poorest person I've ever met because you have nothing in here?" Marcus pointed to his own heart. The store had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching, some with their phones out, recording the confrontation. Harrison's face turned red with rage. No one, especially not some street kid, had ever dared speak to him like that. "You little—" Kay took a step forward, his hand raised as if to strike the boy, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke words that would haunt Harrison Sterling for years to come. "Go ahead, hit me. Show everyone here what kind of man you really are. But I want you to remember this moment, Mr. Sterling. Remember my face. Remember my name, Marcus Thompson. Because I swear to you, I'll pay you back when I grow up, but not in the way you think. One day, when you've lost everything that matters. When you finally understand what it's like to need help and have no one care. You'll remember the boy who begged you for milk for his baby sister. And you'll realize that you had a chance to be human, to show kindness, to make a difference in someone's life, and you chose to be cruel instead." Marcus pulled out his 75 cents and placed them on the counter. "Keep the change," he said to the manager. "Maybe use it to buy yourself a heart." Then he turned and walked out into the rain. His head held high despite the tears streaming down his face. Unknown to Harrison Sterling, one of the people recording was Jennifer Walsh, a social media influencer with 3 million followers. She posted the video that night with the caption, "Billionaire refuses to help hungry baby. You won't believe what this brave boy said." Within hours, the video had gone viral. By morning, it had been viewed 10 million times and shared across every platform. News stations picked it up, and soon Marcus Thompson's face was everywhere. But more importantly, people started looking into Harrison Sterling's business practices, and what they found was shocking. Years of tax evasion, illegal evictions, bribing city officials, and worse. The FBI, who had been building a case against him for months, suddenly had public pressure to act. Meanwhile, donations poured in for Marcus and baby Maya. A GoFundMe page raised over $2 million in just 3 days. Scholarship offers came from private schools, and child services stepped in to ensure that children were properly cared for while their mother recovered in the hospital. Marcus was overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. But he never forgot his promise to Harrison Sterling. 15 years passed in what seemed like a blink of an eye. Marcus Thompson, the boy who had stood in wet shoes begging for milk, had grown into Dr. Marcus Thompson, graduating from Harvard Medical School at the top of his class. He specialized in pediatric medicine, driven by the memory of his sister's hunger cries. But medicine wasn't his only pursuit. Using the education he'd received thanks to the viral video and subsequent support, Marcus had also earned a business degree and started investing. He studied the market obsessively, particularly keeping track of one company, Sterling Enterprises. He watched as Harrison's empire slowly crumbled under the weight of legal battles and investigations that had started the day after their confrontation. The FBI had frozen many of Harrison's assets, and lawsuits from tenants he'd illegally evicted drained millions more. By the time Marcus turned 25, Harrison Sterling had lost almost everything. The man who once owned half of Manhattan now lived in a small apartment in Queens, surviving on Social Security. His wife had divorced him and taken what little remained. His children wanted nothing to do with him. He was alone, sick with diabetes he couldn't afford to properly treat, and forgotten by the world that had once bowed to his wealth. One rainy February evening, exactly 15 years after their first meeting, Harrison Sterling collapsed on the street. His blood sugar had dropped dangerously low, and he couldn't afford the insulin he desperately needed. As he lay on the cold concrete, barely conscious, he heard footsteps approaching. Through blurry vision, he saw a well-dressed young man kneeling beside him. The man was checking his pulse, calling for an ambulance, performing the basic first aid that would save his life. It wasn't until Harrison was in the hospital bed, receiving the treatment he needed, that he got a good look at his savior. The young doctor's name tag read Dr. Marcus Thompson, Chief of Pediatric Medicine. Harrison's eyes widened in recognition, and Marcus smiled. "Hello, Mr. Sterling. I told you I'd pay you back when I grew up." Harrison expected mockery, expected Marcus to gloat about his fall from grace. But instead, Marcus sat down beside his bed and pulled out a check. "This is for $10 million, Marcus said quietly. "It's approximately what you lost the day our video went viral and started your legal troubles. I've been investing the money people donated to help me and Maya, and I've done quite well. I want you to have this." Harrison's hands shook as he looked at the check he couldn't understand. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken by years of bitterness and regret. "Why would you help me after what I did to you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "My father used to tell me that the true measure of a person isn't how they treat those above them, but how they treat those below them. You failed that test 15 years ago. But he also taught me that anyone can change, anyone can learn, anyone can become better than they were. The question is, Mr. Sterling, what will you do with this second chance?" Harrison started to cry, something he hadn't done in 50 years. "I don't deserve this. I was cruel. I was heartless. I've spent 15 years thinking about that day, about what I should have done differently." Marcus stood up to leave, but turned back at the door. "My baby sister Maya is starting college next year. She wants to be a social worker, to help families. In crisis, she doesn't remember being hungry as a baby, but I've told her the story. You know what she said? She said she hopes you found peace. That's the difference between people like her and people like you were, Mr. Sterling. She chose kindness even for someone who showed none." Over the following months, Harrison Sterling underwent a transformation that shocked everyone who had known him in his previous life. He used the money Marcus had given him not to rebuild his empire, but to create the Sterling Thompson Foundation, a charity dedicated to providing food and medical care to children in poverty. He sold his remaining possessions and moved into a modest apartment near the foundation's offices, working 18-hour days to help families in need. When reporters asked him about his dramatic change, he would always tell them about the boy who begged him for milk and the man who saved his life. "I spent 50 years believing that money was power," Harrison would say. "But real power is the ability to change someone's life for the better. Real wealth is measured in the kindness you show and the lives you touch." A 10-year-old boy taught me that, and it took me 15 years to learn the lesson. Marcus and Harrison began working together, combining Marcus's medical expertise with Harrison's business experience and connections. The Sterling Thompson Foundation grew rapidly, opening clinics in underserved neighborhoods across New York City. They provided free medical care, food programs, and educational support to thousands of families. Maya Thompson, now a graduate student in social work, joined the foundation as well. She didn't remember Harrison as the man who had refused to help her as a baby, but rather as the man who had dedicated his final years to ensuring no child would ever go hungry again. She would often see him in the foundation's food pantry, personally, packing bags of groceries for families, always making sure to include plenty of baby formula. "Mr. Sterling," she said to him one day, "Marcus told me you were different before, that you were cold and cruel. I can't imagine it. The man I know has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met." Harrison smiled sadly. "I was a different person then, Maya. I thought strength meant never showing weakness. That success meant stepping on others to climb higher. Your brother taught me that true strength is admitting when you're wrong and working to make it right. True success is lifting others up with you. He paused, looking at a photo on his desk of Marcus, Maya, and himself at the foundation's opening. I once told your brother he would amount to nothing. He proved me wrong in the most beautiful way possible. He became everything I never was: compassionate, generous, and truly wealthy in all the ways that matter. The rain was falling again on that February evening. Exactly 20 years after their first meeting, when Harrison Sterling stood before a packed auditorium to receive the Humanitarian of the Year award. He was 82 now, his health failing but his spirits stronger than ever. As he approached the podium, he saw Marcus and Maya in the front row, smiling up at him. 20 years ago, Harrison began, his voice still strong despite his age. A desperate boy came to me, begging for milk for his baby sister. He offered me a promise that he would pay me back when he grew up. I laughed at him, I mocked him, I turned him away without a second thought. That boy's name was Marcus Thompson. And that baby was Maya Thompson. They're sitting right here in the front row. The audience turned to look at the siblings who were holding hands, tears in their eyes. Marcus kept his promise, but not in the way either of us expected. He didn't just pay me back with money when I had lost everything. He paid me back with something far more valuable: the chance to discover who I really was beneath all the wealth and arrogance. He showed me that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose kindness, never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Harrison's voice broke as he continued, "I don't have much time left. The doctors say maybe a few months. But I want to use every moment I have to tell this story, to make sure everyone knows that the boy I once called worthless became the man who saved my soul, and the baby sister he was trying to feed. She's now the director of our foundation's Family Services Division, helping thousands of children every single day." He looked directly at Marcus and Maya. "You asked me once to be the person with a good heart. It took me 20 years, but I finally became that person thanks to you." The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes. Marcus and Maya rushed to the stage to embrace the old man who had become like a grandfather to them. As they held each other, Harrison whispered, "I've signed everything over to the foundation. Every penny I have left, it's all going to help kids like you were. It's not enough to make up for all the harm I caused, but it's a start." Marcus pulled back to look at him. "You've more than made up for it, Harrison. You've saved thousands of lives. You've given hope to families who had none. You've become the man my father would have been proud to know." 3 months later, Harrison Sterling passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, the church was packed with families he had helped, children he had fed, patients from the free clinics he had funded. Marcus gave the eulogy, telling the story of their first meeting. "One more time. Harrison Sterling died as one of the richest men in New York," Marcus said, "not because of his bank account, but because of the lives he touched. He learned what I knew, even as a scared 10-year-old boy. That true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the difference you make in the world." He learned that every person, no matter how poor or desperate, has value. He learned that a promise from a child can change the course of multiple lives. As they lowered Harrison's casket into the ground, Maya placed a small carton of milk on top of it, the same brand Marcus had tried to buy 20 years ago. "Thank you," she whispered, "for becoming the person we needed you to be." The Sterling Thompson Foundation continued to grow, eventually becoming one of the largest charitable organizations in the United States. In every office, in every clinic, in every food pantry, there hung the same photo, a screenshot from that viral video 20 years ago, showing a desperate boy and an arrogant billionaire with a plaque underneath that read, "Never underestimate the power of kindness. for it can transform even the hardest of hearts. In memory of Harrison Sterling, who learned that true wealth is measured not in what you have, but in what you give. Marcus continued his work as both a doctor and the Foundation's president, always remembering the lesson from that rainy night. Every child who came to the clinic hungry received food. Every family in crisis received help. No one was ever turned away. He married a fellow doctor named Sarah, and they had 3 children of their own. He told them the story often, teaching them that promises matter, that kindness is strength, and that anyone can change if given the chance. Maya became a nationally recognized advocate for children's rights. Speaking at conferences around the world about poverty, hunger, and the importance of compassion. She would always begin her speeches the same way. When I was 8 months old, I was hungry, and my brother tried to buy me milk with 75 cents. The man who refused to help us that day eventually became one of my greatest heroes, proving that it's never about where you start, but where you choose to go. She established the Harrison Sterling Memorial Scholarship, specifically for children from poverty who showed exceptional promise. Just as she and Marcus had. Years turned into decades, and the story of Marcus Thompson and Harrison Sterling became legend in New York City. Business schools taught it as a case study in redemption and corporate social responsibility. Medical schools used it to teach about compassion in healthcare. Social work programs highlighted it as an example of the ripple effects of both cruelty and kindness. But for Marcus, it remained simply a promise kept. Every year on the anniversary of that first meeting, he would visit Harrison's grave with Maya. They would pour a small carton of milk on the headstone and remember both the desperate night that started it all and the beautiful journey that followed. You know, Maya said during one of these visits, 30 years after that night, Harrison once told me he wished he could go back and change that moment. I told him I was glad he couldn't. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Why? She smiled, looking at the sprawling Foundation campus visible from the cemetery, the hundreds of families they helped every day, the thousands of lives that had been changed. Because if he had just given you the money that night, none of this would exist. His cruelty led to his redemption, which led to all of this. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for the best things that follow. As Marcus stood there, now 50 years old, with gray threading through his hair, he thought about the 10-year-old boy he had been, standing in wet shoes, making a promise he had no idea how he would keep. He thought about Harrison, who had lived his first 70 years in spiritual poverty despite his billions, only to die genuinely rich in the ways that mattered. He thought about all the children who would never have to beg for milk because of what had grown from that painful moment. I swear I'll pay you back when I grow up, he whispered to the headstone, repeating the words that had changed everything. Promise kept, Mr. Sterling, promise kept. As they walked away, a young mother with a baby approached them, recognizing Marcus from the Foundation. Dr. Thompson, she said, tears in her eyes, I just wanted to thank you. The Foundation saved my daughter's life. She was born premature, and we couldn't afford the special formula she needed. You made sure she had everything. Marcus smiled and looked at the baby, healthy and giggling in her mother's arms. What's her name? He asked. The mother smiled. Hope. I named her Hope because that's what you gave us. As the woman walked away, Marcus and Maya stood together. Watching the sun set over the city their foundation had helped transform. The story of I swear I'll pay you when I grow up became more than just a viral moment from decades past. It became a testament to the power of keeping promises, the possibility of redemption, and the truth that kindness, even when it comes late, can still change the world. Marcus Thompson. The boy who begged a millionaire for milk for his sister had not only kept his promise to pay Harrison Sterling back, he had paid the whole world forward, creating a legacy of compassion that would outlive them all. And somewhere in heaven, Harrison Sterling and Marcus's father stood together, watching their children build a better world, proud of how a moment of desperate need had transformed into a lifetime of giving. The boy who had nothing had given everything. The man who had everything had learned what it meant to truly have something worth living for. And in the end, they had both become exactly who they were meant to be, not through the easy path of privilege, but through the difficult journey of growth, forgiveness, and love. In the years that followed, the foundation established international branches, helping children in poverty around the world. Marcus's own children grew up working in the foundation's programs, learning from a young age that wealth meant responsibility, that privilege meant service, and that every person deserved dignity and respect. They heard the story countless times, but it never grew old because they could see its impact in the faces of every family they helped. One of Marcus's daughters, named Harrison in honor of the man who had learned to change, became a doctor like her father. At her medical school graduation, she gave a speech that went viral in its own right. "My namesake was once a cruel man who refused to help a desperate child," she said. "But he became a hero because he learned that it's never too late to choose. Love over indifference, generosity over greed, and humanity over pride." I carry his name not to remember who he was at his worst, but to honor who he became at his best. We all have the capacity for both great cruelty and great kindness. The choice of which we express defines not just our character, but our legacy. The Foundation's influence grew beyond charity work. It lobbied for policy changes that addressed systemic poverty. It funded research into childhood nutrition and development. It created job training programs for parents and educational opportunities for children. What had started as one boy's desperate attempt to feed his sister had evolved into a movement that challenged how society treated its most vulnerable members. Politicians sought the Foundation's endorsement. Corporations partnered with them to improve their social responsibility. The story of Marcus and Harrison became required reading in many schools, teaching children about empathy, redemption, and the long-term consequences of our choices. But Marcus never forgot that it all started with 75 cents and a promise. He kept those 3 quarters in a frame on his desk, a reminder that even the smallest amount, when combined with determination and hope, could change the world. As Marcus approached his 70th birthday, he announced his retirement from active medical practice to focus entirely on the Foundation. At his farewell ceremony at the hospital, hundreds of colleagues, patients, and families gathered to honor him. The hospital unveiled a new wing named the Thompson Sterling Center for Pediatric Care, funded entirely by the Foundation. In his speech, Marcus said, "60 years ago, I stood in wet shoes, begging for help. Today, we stand in this beautiful facility that will ensure no child in this city ever goes without medical care. This is what happens when we choose to see each other, not as strangers or statistics, but as family." Harrison Sterling taught me that even the hardest hearts can learn to love. My sister Maya taught me that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. My parents, though gone too soon, taught me that dignity doesn't depend on wealth. And all of you have taught me that when good people come together, miracles happen. The ceremony ended with a surprise that moved Marcus to tears. Maya had secretly contacted thousands of families the Foundation had helped over the decades. Each had contributed $1 to create a special gift, a sculpture of a young boy holding a baby with an older man kneeling beside them, offering help. The inscription read, "In honor of Dr. Marcus Thompson, who kept his promise, and Harrison Sterling, who learned to keep the promise we all make to each other as human beings, to care, to help, and to love." As Marcus touched the sculpture, he was transported back to that cold, rainy night when he was just a frightened boy trying to save his sister. He could never have imagined that his desperate plea would lead to all of this. But perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that our smallest actions, our moments of greatest vulnerability, Our promises made in desperation can become the seeds of profound change if we have the courage to see them through. The story concludes where it began, with rain falling on a February evening in New York City. But now, instead of a desperate boy begging for milk, there were hundreds of families receiving free groceries from the Sterling Thompson Foundation food banks. Instead of a cruel billionaire refusing to help, there were countless volunteers, many of them wealthy individuals inspired by Harrison's transformation, serving meals and stocking shelves. And somewhere in that crowd was an old man named Marcus Thompson, his hair white now, his hands weathered by decades of service, still keeping the promise he made as a 10-year-old boy, not just to pay back a debt, but to pay forward a legacy of kindness that would outlive them all. Because in the end, the story of "I swear I'll pay you when I grow up" wasn't really about money or revenge or even redemption. It was about the simple, powerful truth that every person has the capacity to change the world, whether they have 75 cents or $75 million. It was about the promise we all make to each other, whether we realize it or not, to see each other's humanity, to respond to each other's need, and to believe that anyone, no matter how lost they seem, can find their way to kindness. Marcus Thompson kept his promise. Harrison Sterling learned to keep his, and in doing so, they proved that the greatest wealth any of us can achieve is measured not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away. Not in how we treat those who can help us, but in how we treat those who need our help. And not in the promises we make when we have everything, but in the promises we keep when we have nothing. As the rain continued to fall on New York City that February evening, washing the streets clean and nourishing the ground for new growth, the legacy of a desperate boy's promise lived on in every meal served, every child treated, every family helped. The boy who had begged for milk had become the man who ensured no child would ever have to beg again. The millionaire who had refused to help had become the philanthropist who gave everything away. And the baby sister who had cried from hunger had become the woman who made sure no baby would cry from hunger in their city again. This was their story, a story of promises kept, hearts changed, and the extraordinary power of ordinary kindness to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. It was a story that would be told for generations, inspiring countless others to look beyond their circumstances, to see beyond their prejudices, and to believe beyond their doubts that change is possible, redemption is real, and love is the most powerful force in the universe. The story of "I swear I'll pay you when I grow up" had become more than just a memory or a legend. It had become a living testament to the best of what humanity could be when we choose to see each other not as strangers, but as family. Not as problems, but as possibilities. Not as they are, but as they could become with just a little help, a little hope, and a little faith in the promise of tomorrow.